So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are heading up to your link house, right? Just for a quiet weekend.
Okay, that was nice.
Yeah, you pull up to the property, you go to unlock the doors, and you find out that while you are completely out of town, another famous musician's family has secretly trespassed on your land.
Wait, trespass?
Yes, and they didn't just trespass, they snuck on to scatter someone's ashes, like right over your property.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like the setup to some bizarre Southern Gothic novel or something.
Right, but that is exactly what actually happened at Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash's home on Old Hickory Lake.
Wow.
Yeah, the family of another country music legend basically waited until the Cashes were away, snuck onto the grounds, and spread his ashes right there on the lawn. And those ashes belonged to a man named Faron Young.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so welcome to our deep dive into the source material on the life of a man who was honestly just a force of nature. If you know classic country music, you probably know him as the hillbilly heartthrob or, the young sheriff.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was an absolute honky-tonk legend.
Yeah, we're talking about a chart-topping career that lasted, what, over 30 years? Crossing over into pop music, film, and literally building this massive business empire.
He really was a pioneer.
Yeah.
He wasn't just participating in the country music industry in a lot of ways. He was actually helping to architect the business model of Nashville as we know it today.
Right.
But the historical record we have on him, it paints this incredibly complex and, well, often really dark picture.
It does. And our mission today is to explore the man behind those legendary hits. We're going to track the story of massive early success, some truly unexpected artistic pivots, an industry that was just rapidly changing underneath his feet, and the personal demons that ultimately led to a very tragic end.
Yeah, it's quite a journey.
So to understand how a man becomes such a towering, complicated figure that his ashes are secretly scattered on Johnny Cash's lawn, we really have to look at the exact moment his ambition shifted. Let's start with his roots.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So it's Shreveport, Louisiana in 1932. He's born the youngest of 6 kids, and he's growing up on a family-operated dairy farm just outside the city.
Which, I mean, growing up on a dairy farm in Louisiana in the 1930s, that sounds like the textbook origin story for a country music traditionalist, right?
Totally. You'd expect him to just be playing a banjo in the barn.
Exactly. You would assume he was steeped in those folk traditions from day one, but he actually had no interest in being a country star initially.
Wait, really? No interest?
None. I mean, he was singing from an early age, but his sights were set firmly on the pop charts. He actually wanted to be a crooner.
A pop crooner. That makes his pivot so fascinating, because he only changes his mind after this very specific, almost theatrical turning point.
Right, the hayride.
Yeah. He tags along with some friends to watch a broadcast of the Louisiana Hayride, and for those of you listening who might not be familiar with the Hayride, this was this legendary radio show broadcast out of Shreveport.
It basically functioned as a launching pad, right? So almost like the minor leagues for the Grand Ole Opry, where massive stars would go to cut their teeth.
Exactly. And on this particular night, a young guy named Hank Williams is performing, and Hank Williams is in his absolute prime here.
Oh, man.
Faron Young is sitting in the audience, and he watches as Hank Williams performs not 1, not 2, but 9 consecutive encores.
9 encores.
Yeah.
That is just, I can't even imagine. The crowd was in such a frenzy
Yeah.
that they literally simply would not let him leave the stage.
I'm just trying to picture the sheer electricity in that room. It makes me think of like a kid today who has spent his whole life rigorously training to be a classical opera singer, totally focused on that refined path.
Right.
And then one night, his friends drag him to this sweaty underground punk rock show. He feels the primal energy, he sees the crowd losing their minds, and he just completely changes his entire life's trajectory overnight, based purely on the energy of that room.
That is a perfect analogy. Because what's fascinating here is how absolute that pivot was. He sees that visceral, raw connection Hank Williams has with that audience, and he just drops the pop dream immediately.
Just abandons it.
Completely. He switches to country music, begins performing at the local Optimist Club, and just fully immerses himself in that world.
And he immerses himself so deeply that his personal life actually becomes directly intertwined with his new idol.
Oh, this part is wild.
Faron actually starts dating a woman named Billie Jean Jones, and Faron is the one who introduces Billie Jean to Hank Williams.
I mean, talk about country music history colliding in real time.
Yeah.
That introduction fundamentally alters the country music landscape.
Because they get married.
Yes. Billie Jean Jones and Hank Williams end up getting married in October of 1952.
Meanwhile, Faron's own career is catching fire at this point. He gets discovered by country star Webb Pierce, who brings him onto the Louisiana Hayride in 1951.
Right, his big break.
Yeah, he graduates high school, signs a deal with Capitol Records, and moves to Nashville. By October 1952, he puts out this track called Goin' Steady, and it is just an instant hit.
But then we hit this massive structural disruption in his life.
The draft.
Yeah. Just 1 month after that breakthrough, in November 1952, Faron is drafted into the United States Army. And the standard narrative in a lot of the historical literature frames this as a major roadblock, like this moment where his career was derailed just as it was taking off.
Wait, I actually really want to dig into that narrative because when I was reading through the sources, I found myself totally confused by the idea that the draft, quote unquote, derailed him.
How so?
Well, let's look at the mechanics of what actually happened. He gets drafted, sure, but while he is literally sweating through basic training, going steady, rockets up to #2 on the Billboard country charts.
Which is incredible timing, but usually, being pulled away from public performance and radio promotion for 2 whole years is a death knell for a new artist.
Right, the whole out of sight, out of mind thing.
Exactly.
Except he wasn't out of sight. The U.S. Army Band swoops in and makes Faron Young their very first country music singer.
Oh, that's true.
They put him on tour specifically to replace Eddie Fisher, who was a massive pop idol at the time. So I was reading this thinking, this isn't a setback at all. This looks like the greatest PR masterstroke imaginable.
When you look at it like that, yeah.
He gets an all-expenses-paid, government-funded national tour just as his music is dominating the charts. How does the industry view that as a derailment?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of marketing, you are entirely correct. The Army gave him a platform that most artists and record labels simply couldn't buy.
Literally.
They essentially weaponized his talent for troop morale. He had this massive, captive audience of young, homesick soldiers being exposed to his music every single night.
And it kept him entirely in the public eye, right? Performing constantly, rather than just fading away in a trench somewhere.
Exactly. Plus, the structural benefits extended to his personal life, too. While he was stationed at Fort McPherson in Georgia, he meets Hilda Macon.
And she has some serious country music pedigree.
Oh, yeah. She's the daughter of an Army Master Sergeant, but she's also the great-granddaughter of Uncle Dave Macon, who was an early Grand Ole Opry star.
Wow.
They get married in November 1954, right after he's discharged.
So he exits the military with a wife who deeply understands the music industry lineage, this massively expanded fan base from the Army, and completely honed performance skills. He returns to Nashville in late 1954, ready to just completely dominate the market.
And dominate he does. I mean,
Yeah.
He unleashes this string of honky-tonk hits for Capitol Records. He records the first hit version of Don Gibson's classic song, Sweet Dreams.
Ah, I love that song.
It's a classic. But the absolute commercial peak of this era arrives a few years later in 1961 with a song called Hello Walls.
Hello Walls is such a defining moment. It was written by this then up-and-coming songwriter named Willie Nelson, and Faron Young turned it into a crossover sensation.
And we really have to understand what a crossover hit meant in 1961.
It was a really big deal.
Huge. It wasn't just charting on country radio. It crossed over to the mainstream pop charts, selling over 1 million copies and earning a gold disc. It made him completely ubiquitous.
Ubiquitous is the perfect word, honestly, because this is the exact moment he starts leveraging his fame to expand his brand into visual media. He isn't satisfied just being a voice coming out of a jukebox anymore.
All right, he wants to be seen.
Exactly. He starts acting. He stars in these low-budget Western films with titles like Hidden Guns and Raiders of Old California.
Yeah.
And that on-screen persona is actually where he earns the enduring nickname, the Young Sheriff.
Which is such a great piece of branding.
Mm-hmm.
And this expansion into film is a vital clue to how Faron operated overall. He was an early pioneer of what we now think of as the Music Row business model.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, to explain why this matters, you have to realize that in the 1950s and 60s, most country artists operated essentially as employees.
Okay.
They sang the songs, they took their performance fee, and the record labels kept all the real wealth. Faron looked at that system and basically rejected it outright.
Oh, so he starts acting like a modern-day music mogul. Like you think of artists today like Jay-Z or Taylor Swift, who realize the real power isn't just in the intellectual property, but in owning the actual infrastructure of the industry itself.
Precisely. Faron was doing this over half a century ago. He took the massive capital he generated from hits like Hello Walls and
Wow.
invested it heavily in real estate right along Nashville's Music Row.
Wow, so he was buying up the literal ground where the industry was operating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, in 1963, he takes an even bolder step and co-founds a trade magazine called Music City News.
Which is just brilliant vertical integration. He's creating the art, he's owning the buildings where the business of that art is conducted, and now he is publishing the media that shapes the public narrative about that art.
It's genius. It gave him an incredible amount of leverage and, honestly, insulation from the industry. And artistically, he still had undeniable raw talent.
Oh, for sure.
Fast forward a decade to 1971, and he releases It's 4 in the Morning. It's this beautiful waltz-time ballad written by Jerry Chestnut, and it becomes one of his greatest
Oh,
records.
huge.
Yeah, it hits #1 on the country charts and even peaks at #3 on the UK singles chart, which just proves his voice could still command an international audience.
That vocal versatility, shifting from 1950s honky-tonk to 1970s waltz ballads, is staggering. But as we dig deeper into the sources from the 1970s and 1980s, this very dark dichotomy starts to emerge.
Yeah, it gets tough here.
While he had this ironclad control over his business empire and his vocal performances, the narrative of his personal life starts to unravel in a highly publicized way. The music starts getting totally overshadowed by his behavior.
The incidents detailed in the historical record are genuinely jarring. I mean, in 1972, he is performing a concert in Clarksburg, West Virginia.
Yeah.
He claims a girl in the audience spat on him. And his response isn't to, have security remove her. He physically spanks her in front of the audience during the concert. He is arrested and charged with assault.
I was reading the outcome of that arrest, and the punishment is wild.
Correct.
He goes before a justice of the peace and is fined $24 plus $11 in court costs, a total of $35 for assaulting an audience member.
It's practically nothing.
Right. And then, jumping forward to December 1984, he's at his home on Harbor Island, and he fires a pistol into his own kitchen ceiling.
Yeah. These actions go far beyond eccentric rock star behavior. They are glaring, massive red flags of a man in deep crisis.
And this is where I struggle to contextualize what we're reading. For you listening, think about how the media would react to an artist firing a gun into their ceiling today.
Oh, it would be everywhere. Career ending, potentially.
Exactly. So was this behavior just accepted as part of the outlaw era of country music where being dangerous was essentially part of the marketing? Or is this a textbook example of a man whose wealth and media power completely shielded him from facing any real consequences?
Well, this raises an important question about the complicity of the industry itself, honestly. The outlaw image of the 70s and 80s definitely provided a convenient smokescreen for a lot of bad behavior.
Right. The whole rebel persona.
Yeah, drinking heavily, acting wildly, bucking authority. That was romanticized. It sold records. But firing a weapon inside your own home isn't marketing. It's a symptom of severe distress. Faron was suffering from chronic severe alcoholism and intense bouts of depression.
And his business empire provided the ultimate insulation. When you own the real estate the executives rent, and you co-found the primary magazine that reports on the genre, people are heavily incentivized to just look the other way.
Exactly. The infrastructure he built to protect his wealth ended up enabling his worst personal demons. He consistently refused to seek professional help for his drinking.
And we see the devastating human cost of that insulation at his divorce trial. After 34 years of marriage, he and Hilda separate, and they ultimately divorce in 1987.
Such a long marriage to end that way.
Yeah. During the trial proceedings, that incident with the gun is brought up. He is directly asked under oath if he feared hurting someone by shooting holes into his own ceiling.
And his response?
His reply was a brazen, not whatsoever.
Wow. It's just the sheer arrogance of unchecked addiction.
Ah.
And the collateral damage wasn't limited to his marriage either. His son, Robin, had actually followed him into the country music business.
Right, Robin was quite involved.
Yeah, Robin headlined Faron's nightclub, which, somewhat ironically, was called Faron Young's Jailhouse.
Oh, the irony.
Robin even toured as Faron's opening act in the early 80s, meaning his family had a front row seat night after night to his physical and emotional decline.
Which brings us to the final, profoundly tragic chapter of his career. As we move into the late 1980s and early 1990s, the landscape just starts shifting under his feet.
The whole industry changes.
Right, he's bouncing around between labels, spending time at MCA, and then moving to an independent label called Step One Records. And then in 1991, the country music industry undergoes this massive systemic revolution.
To understand why this revolution broke Faron Young, you really have to understand the mechanics of what happened in 1991. It wasn't just a slight change in taste, it was a total overhaul of the genre's sonic profile and how it was marketed.
This is the Garth Brooks era.
Exactly. Garth Brooks and that whole stadium pop country sound completely takes over. The industry modernized its data tracking, radio stations consolidated, and suddenly the traditional honky-tonk sound that Faron championed was viewed as just a relic.
It was almost an overnight obsolescence. The industry decided it needed to appeal to a younger, suburban demographic, and older artists were aggressively pushed off the radio playlists just to make room.
Imagine spending 4 decades building an industry, literally owning the ground it was built on, only to have that exact same industry completely shut its doors to you. He felt entirely discarded.
And what's poignant is that there were younger, alternative country acts trying to bridge that gap. A band called BR 549 was actively playing Faron's music during this time.
Right, introducing his honky-tonk sound to a brand new generation of fans.
Yeah. But despite that grassroots respect, Faron felt this deep, agonizing sense of rejection from the mainstream establishment.
And that feeling of professional abandonment created a perfect storm with his deteriorating physical health. He was suffering from severe emphysema and prostate issues, which really limited his ability to perform.
It all compounded.
Exactly. When you combine the loss of his career identity, his failing health, and his totally unaddressed depression, the burden just became insurmountable.
Yeah. On December 9, 1996, Faron Young shot himself. He died the following day in Nashville. He was just 64 years old.
It is a deeply harrowing conclusion. When you synthesize the trajectory of his life, there is this heartbreaking irony that defines his story.
What do you mean?
Think back to his youth. His absolute superpower was his brilliant ability to adapt to change.
Oh, that's so true.
He adapted from wanting to be a pop crooner to becoming a country star the very moment he saw Hank Williams. He adapted to a military draft and turned it into a government-funded tour.
Right, and he adapted his sound to cross over to the pop charts, and then he adapted to the corporate world by vertically integrating his business.
He was a chameleon who always knew exactly how to leverage the moment.
But in his later years, that flexibility just completely vanished. His inability to adapt to a modernized music industry, and, far more tragically, his inability to adapt to his personal struggles by putting down his pride and seeking help for his addiction proved fatal.
It's a very heavy reality to process.
It is. But as we wrap up our deep dive into the sources today, we also have to examine the cultural footprint he left behind, because his legacy certainly didn't end in a Nashville hospital room in 1996.
No, it didn't. The industry he felt abandoned by eventually recognized his foundational contributions. In the year 2000, he was officially inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame.
An honor that was undeniably earned, even if it arrived way too late for him to witness it. And his influence actually permeated pop culture in some genuinely surprising ways. Charles Schulz, the legendary creator of the Peanuts comic strip, was such a massive admirer of Faron Young that he actually named a cat character in the strip Faron.
I love that detail. It highlights just how far his cultural reach extended beyond the borders of Nashville and country music radio.
It really does. He also holds a permanent historical milestone in music media. On March 6, 1983, when country music television CMT launched its network, the very first music video they ever broadcast was a live clip of Faron Young singing "It's 4 in the Morning."
Wow.
He literally inaugurated the visual era of country music television.
Which is incredibly fitting for a man who spent his life pioneering country music media and visual branding.
It really is. So as we step back from the timeline, there's this vital takeaway here about the dual edges of legacy. It is entirely possible for a human being to leave behind an indelible mark of beauty and culture. Songs that millions of people danced to, found comfort in, and fell in love to, while simultaneously leaving behind a trail of profound, unresolved pain for the people who actually had to live with them.
That tension is the core of so many artistic biographies. The public gets the polished art and the hit records. The family gets the messy, often devastating reality behind closed doors.
Right. And it leaves you with something highly provocative to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Think about the artists you love today. Does the music industry inherently demand a certain level of emotional turbulence to create what we consume as quote-unquote authentic art?
That's a great question.
And if it does, at what point does the industry, the labels, the fans, the media ecosystems we help create bear responsibility when that exact same turbulence ultimately destroys the artist?